Why media lacks subtlety in its messaging. There are a bunch of reasons why media like movies or shows lack subtlety in its messaging or narratives now. In this video, we'll go over them. Some reasons are the fault of the industry itself, and others are a product of outside forces, and this video will cover both. I feel like making a video like this and not addressing the cultural bias in the industry would be a disservice to everyone, so I'll briefly address it. Anyways, this is on YouTube and this video isn't about the culture war itself, so I'm not going to go too far into it. This is about the lack of subtlety in movies right now. The problem entertainment media is facing is that the beliefs of the directors are not in line with the views of the masses. The views also aren't in line with anyone of any time in history besides right now either. Their views were recently manufactured in a very artificial way to improve the lives of a very select few at the expense of everyone else. The directors of these films believe that they can change the public perspective on issues as they push subtle or not so subtle narratives throughout the industry. Unfortunately, they aren't wrong as long as they do it subtly as they have in past decades, but yeah, that's just the truth. In decades past, they were very successful, but that's not entirely the work of the entertainment media industry alone. Like the education industry had a lot of heavy lifting in that, probably the most heavy. Anyways, the biggest reason for them pushing these ideas so hard, I think, now is because they don't believe they can fail. Before they were doing it subtle and they were very successful in pushing the ideas and messages into the cultural zeitgeist that now they think they can just get away with anything, which is why they're moving on to this very overt messaging. The idea of using quality storytelling to convince the people of new ideas or new beliefs seems to have fallen out of favor in the industry. Now, I think this is mainly a cope because it doesn't seem to make sense to me to abandon a functional strategy. But it's important to talk about the copes of the industry because they justify and help allow every other reason to exist. They help allow the failure to exist. So it's important to mention them. I think the most important reason for their not so subtle push of narratives now ties into another reason why the traditional media industry will fail, and that's their strategy as a whole. For a while, they've been operating on a blockbuster mindset where they pour massive amounts of money into projects like superhero movies or blue chip IPs that they think are the most optimal investment. They have the safe and proven track records. And in a business sense, there is a lot of merit to this, but there's also negatives that I haven't seen people talk about with this business strategy. And one of them is creating movies is a very difficult thing. It takes a lot of training, skill, and aptitude to be able to produce a good one. And that means, good movie subtlety, at least in adult entertainment, as in not children's content. Anyways, basically, there's an infinite amount of ways to mess up the movie process and make a bad movie. And this is where investing in experience comes in. And studios now aren't producing enough content for directors to gain the experience they need, which is causing a talent pool shrinkage. For example, if you invest $200 million into a blue chip IP or superhero movie, then you're investing the money of potentially 3 movies into one movie. If you're doing that, then you're only training 1 director instead of 3. So if everything is all else is equal, if that movie grosses the same amount of income and costs the same amount, the cost and the profit are the same, well, the experience gain is not the same. And that's where the strategy of blockbuster mindset really falls apart, because it doesn't even matter if the people are burned out or not. You'd be profitable and still run into this issue. It means that blockbuster movies have a massive experience cost, or opportunity cost and experience, I should say. Because after a movie's been shot, filmed, and it's out in theaters, you have to pick who makes the next movie. And if the studio only produces 4 movies a year, and the next year it has to start shooting 4 more movies, then it might only have something like 9 promising options or possible options to shoot the next movie. Whereas if a studio films 12 movies, it has possibly around 28, and this is just a guesstimate. But you can see how this is an issue, because the ratios of directors could be the same, but if you have more flexibility in the pricing of movies, then it's still safer. You can train the more novice directors on lower budget movies and give higher budget movies to more trained individuals. So that's a very important thing from a business standpoint. And I think this switch to the blockbuster mindset is probably the biggest reason that Hollywood can't seem to like get away with any subtlety in their messaging anymore, just because it's very difficult to create a message that's not overt but still audible. You know, create a message that possibly can't even be heard, or create one that's too loud. You know, like if you can't guarantee that you can create one just right, what's the most optimal thing to do in your storytelling? Well, it's probably to make it overt. Like that's what I would assume, and that's what they're doing. But I'm not a storyteller, but this is my assumption. Anyways, there's another reason for like the lack of subtlety in general, and this is another big hurdle that traditional media has to face, and this is one of those hurdles that is coming from outside the industry. Because today, unlike decades in the past, you know, there is the attention wars going on. With the attention wars going on, you know, traditional media now has to face the new media. Like think social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, X, Facebook, WhatsApp, and YouTube, as well as like gaming. And in the past, like a movie was the most low effort entertainment you could partake in, and that's just not true today. So if you just want the bottom lowest effort entertainment, you know, it's not going to be a movie anymore, and that's like a very big loss for the, you know, traditional entertainment industry. Like this is something the industry has noticed too, because it's a very big issue for them, and they've already like taken steps to try and tackle this problem. And I think this is why like the messaging in Hollywood is not that great, because they've started creating like doom scrolling movies, and it's not for sure how prevalent they are. It's not something they really want to talk about, because like it's not received well that they're making these movies. And if you're wondering what they are, it's basically movies that are made to be watched by people who are not watching the movie actively. Like they have it on in the background while they doom scroll on their phone. The characteristics of these movies are, you know, simple plots, characters, and very little subtlety. Like announcing like whatever the character is doing or feeling to the audience, so you know, it can be followed by someone not directly watching the screen. So the industry is very well of the increasing competition for viewers' attention, and it is fully ready to experiment in producing these new movies or new like entertainment to try and coexist with a phone use, because it's hard to fight like a phone addiction. So the industry is just going along with it. So now from their like perspective, you know, subtlety in movies might not actually be a good thing, because if the audience isn't actually watching the movie really, and they're just like watching their phone, then how are they going to pick up on the subtlety? So I think that's an important reason to consider when thinking about the like overtness of like everything in a movie now. I think this is a very important like thing to talk about, because like you would assume that things being very overt is a negative thing to directors, but because of the lack of attention people are now paying, it might actually be seen as a positive by the directors. And with the fact that like it's very hard to produce a subtle like narrative in a movie, so maybe this is why they're leaning into it, because they don't believe that the audience can actually like watch a movie fully, and it takes a lot of skill to do it, and they're not quite convinced they can pull it off, because you know they're not as skilled as, you know, previous generation of filmmakers. So you know that, and then the idea that like they may not even believe it matters. Now, does it matter if they push like narratives in movies very boldly, like if there isn't subtlety? Is that really a problem for like a movie? I think technically speaking, like a movie can like lack subtlety and be good, especially for its like primary like message. Like historically a lot of fables and folktales were that way, and they were good. Now, if they can stand to a modern like viewing and be good is another question, but I think technically speaking, like you don't need subtlety to make a good movie. But I don't think the subtlety in movies is going to come back, and I don't think they will produce good movies, because you know, due to cultural war reasons, I don't think the entertainment industry really can produce good movies. Like it's not what they're interested in. The industry right now is just more into overt messaging to try and convince every single person and like just beat them into submission through like brute force of like just hearing the idea or seeing the idea repeatedly. So I don't think we're going to see a return to subtlety, because it's a very difficult thing to pull off in a movie, and you know, it might not work with the doom scrolling audience in mind. It sounds like a strange thing that people will like no longer, you know, be able to pay attention to movies, and that the movie companies have to work around it. But in the past 20 years, we've seen a lot of strange things pop up, and I don't think this would be that strange. Like if you just look back on like how devastating the invention of the smartphone was initially, you know, generative AI, social media in general, like the idea that for these reasons people might not pay attention to movies as much, and there'll be a slight change in the movie industry. I don't think is a very crazy idea. And I think the industry probably does not believe that either. Anyways, this was my first YouTube video, so make sure to like and subscribe if you found it interesting at all. And the quality is only going to go up from here, so feel free to let me know what you think about it in the comments. Until next time, bye.